Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I wish I had something to talk about instead of just being sad. But the reality of my life is that I still wake up every morning, and even on the days where I feel like I'm going to be okay, something happens and I inevitably break down and cry. And I can't make it stop. I've been making a habit of taking a selfie every time this happens, which is kind of dumb, but I do it because this is so unreal to me that I can't control my emotions. And now I have a visual documentation of that. And as I get ready to head out to the McConkey event this year, it gives me a different appreciation for what Sherry McConkey has been through. I mean, while Shane was an important part of my life, Sherry has become way more important. And the reason that happened is because Shane, her husband, died. And while I've tried to be there for her over the years, Sherry has silently been there for me every step of the way, for me and my family. And while we both experienced the same thing, they were totally different experiences. I had to watch a disease slowly kill Ange, and the pain and suffering was miserable to watch. But I was there for her every step of the way. And I don't know what's better, getting a phone call and having your whole world taken from you, or if it's better to do it the way I did. Both suck. But with Sherry, she has to plan and then relive a celebration of her lost husband, and she has to do that every single year. I can't imagine doing that. Ange's sister suggested to me that we could make Angepalooza an annual thing, but I just don't think I can handle that. I don't know how Sherry does it. She really is an incredible woman. And where she lives, Palisades is the birthplace of Rad, and they understand the importance of McConkey's legacy, and they bend over backwards every year for this event. So thank you, Palisades, thank you, Sherry, thank you, the McConkey Foundation, thank you, Shane. And while I couldn't be there last year because I was in the hospital for 2 months off and on being by Ange's side, I plan on being back from here on out to celebrate Shane with everyone, and I'll celebrate Ange inside. I know Ange loves Shane, I know she loves Sherry, and she loved everything about this event. Hopefully she's looking down on us every year on the sun deck and she's sharing a beer in the sky with us. But since I don't believe in any of that kind of stuff, whatever. I will say it's better to have loved than lost. But the whole lost part is really terrible, and it's something you can't comprehend until it happens to you. While Ange lost her life, my guest this week has a job where he'll never lose. Jason Arens is the boss of all bosses when it comes to ski judging, and there's so much more to Jason's story. But as an intro, know that Jason is the top judge at every ski event that matters. From the X Games to being the head judge at the Olympics, Jason sits on top of the judges' pyramid. And when he's not judging the best athletes in the world, he's an owner of Surface Skis, Joystick poles, and Causwell outerwear. And he's running the day-to-day business for all brands. Jason is a busy man, and I was lucky to get an hour with him after he returned home from the Olympics, and it's an interesting and educational podcast. Before we get into it, I want to thank you for listening each week. I've been getting a lot of feedback thanking me for the show over the years, and that you're bummed that I'm quitting. Well, while I said 500 episodes could be my last, I'm leaning on taking this another 2 months to do a full 10 years, so that would be like January 15th is where I would end the podcast. So that's the plan right now. While I could quit at 500, I should make it about 15 to 20 more episodes from there, and it'll be a full 10 years. And that's just because I've been getting a lot of people bummed, and I realized I can carry this thing out, and I might as well. So thank you for listening. Thank you for the incredible messages. And thank you for supporting my incredible sponsors who make this podcast happen. They are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Best Day Brewing, and Insta360 Action Cams. Now, let's talk to Jason Arens. We have to start with the Olympics, and first, congratulations. The ski judges seem to do pretty well, especially compared to the snowboard judges, but that's my take. How did the internet react to your judging?
Thankfully, I feel like the internet was pretty kind to us overall after this Olympics. I mean, we saw some of the backlash that hit snowboarding, but I mean, other than people that probably just don't know that much about the actual judging or the sport themselves, I think that's the type of comments that maybe we saw an abnormal amount compared to other contests that you judge. You know, like this, there's so much visibility. There's a lot more people wanting to stir up controversy and discuss the judging. But for the most part, I feel very confident with the way it went, and I feel like it was relatively well received.
And I think for just the regular human out there, if you're not a ski nerd, because it's safe to say that you and the rest of the judges are the biggest ski nerds in the world, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That's how I would categorize all people that get involved with free ski judging in general. Is just we're nerding out in the sport in a capacity that most people only can imagine.
So while we're all watching it and we're like, oh, that might be a new trick and that might be different, you're like, there's off-axis spins, there's cork spins, there's this rotation, there's that rotation, there's doubles, there's so many variables that you have to fit in, and it's changing every year that nobody, unless they've got eyeballs on it and know every single trick, they can't really comment on the judging because even me, who has a lot of experience with a lot of stuff, I'm just not knowledgeable enough to have even a conversation about the deep tricks, and my job in this podcast is going to be to make sure you don't nerd out about that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the whole thing about the sport that's really interesting is how quickly it changes. So the judging methodology has been somewhat fluid, but like consistent through the years as to how the sports wanted it applied to the way that the sport can move forward. And yeah, judging is an interesting pursuit for somebody that spends as much time paying attention to ski stuff as me. So if we can keep off the non-specifics, I find myself getting bogged down in the details quite often.
No, we'll stay away from the details. We'll talk about the stuff that people don't ask you about judging most likely. So when we think about Olympic judges, all of them have a serious background in the sport, and there's no reason questioning any of that because that's just a given. These guys know every trick. They've been around the sport. They know the athletes. They know everything that's going on. But how do they find out that they're selected as an Olympic judge? Like, is it a big deal where you're calling up this panel 2 years ahead of time and it's the honor of a lifetime?
The whole judging world is like pretty interconnected, and I find myself being kind of the main point of contact for the majority of the judging world on the free ski side, especially like as it relates under FIS. So, it's like a multi-year process. Like everybody that actually was selected to judge this Olympics has been judging at a pretty dedicated rate for an extended period of time. Generally, I'd say 5 to 15 years into judging, respectively, before generally getting the call up that you might get to judge the most high-profile contest associated with FIS that you have an opportunity to. The Olympics, it does carry a bit more weight to get nominated from your country to judge that. And obviously with the nation requirements, there's limitations on how many people from each nation are able to participate. But yeah, it's really the best of the best, really trying to take from that crew that we have on the World Cup circuit and make sure that we have the right panel in place to do the sport justice on that day with those eyes on it, with all that circumstance.
And you're the head Olympic judge. Does that mean that you get to make those phone calls and kind of make those people's days by telling them they've been selected as part of your judging panel?
I am the judging coordinator for FIS, so I was the person that got to tell all those people that they made the cut, which was really cool. But I also found myself in a unique position where, in addition to being the judges coordinator, I was also the head judge for this Olympics. And so I was selecting the team of people that I was going to get to work with for this event. And it was a great pleasure with working all them. They really put in a lot of work, specifically the last 2 seasons, to make sure that everyone was up to snuff, feeling confident, and understood the spectacle that the Olympics creates before showing up, to make sure that they're ready to do their job to represent skiing to the best of their ability on that day.
So they get the call, they get to be part of this program. I'm sure there's test events and all different things, but we're going to talk about the Olympic Games. And for that, does the IOC pay for flights, lodging, and pretty much all the judges' expenses while you're at the games?
Yeah, so we are paid to be a part of all of it, and accommodations, travel, meal plans are all kind of standard. We are paid a daily volunteer rate, more of an expense, if you will, that you're getting credited every day for working. But it is a really long trip, and all of the judges are generally stepping away from their lives, their other jobs, their other means of income. So yeah, while we're not walking away rich from this at all, we do have a pretty nice setup while we're there with accommodations and all that provided right at the base of the venue. We were about a 2-minute walk from the gate that kept us away from the big air slopestyle and halfpipe venue in Lavinia.
That is pretty amazing. And when you think about the actual money that you make, or you say the stipend or volunteer money, which is crazy to think volunteer for the biggest event in the planet for these athletes. But I heard with other events, World Cups and stuff like this, and it might not be accurate because I could get bad information, but it's like around 100 or 150 bucks per event.
It's roughly 125 Swiss franc per day. Flat rate, off day, contest day. that's the rate. Like all contests that we're judging have different day rates that we're working with. The Olympics is on a bit tighter of a structure just based on the sheer volume of employees that it has for a short period of time every couple of years. But it definitely is on the lowest end of what we're dealing with. And obviously, the thing about judging is the events can't happen without judging. We understand that it's an expense. We understand that the sport is expensive and the course builds and to get everybody together is very expensive. And have those judges in venue on site for the amount of time is an expense, but an expense that's worth making sure this contest is dictated by the people that are paying the closest attention and trying to do the job to their best of their abilities.
It is wild that you're going to make the least amount of money at the most important event in the whole world for these athletes. And, you read about and hear about, you get what you pay for. And I already know that you're like the best judging crew in the world. So they're not getting what they pay for. They're paying you guys pennies and they're getting the best in the world, which I've got to think does it ever frustrate you or are you just more honored to be there? Because I would think the figure skating judges aren't going to get $85 a day and be happy with it.
Yeah, there is a sense of honor and a privilege that we get to be a part of it. But absolutely, any of the people that I work with are dedicating so much of their energy to this and thinking about the way that this is happening in the sport in such a deep and intricate level that the fact that it really isn't something that can be focused on even remotely so as a full-time job is just kind of counterintuitive for the amount of energy and putting their lives on the line that these athletes are bringing to the table every day in competition. So the judges, while we're not putting our life and limb at risk going off those jumps, we certainly are paying attention and trying to make sure that we're doing right by this thing at a capacity that it would be really hard to put a dollar figure on how much I feel like that's worth to have the best of the best on a contest.
I would think the best of the best is needed when you're at the best contest in the world, but the IOC has been known to keep the money at the top and not where it matters, and that's just kind of how that's gone forever. And when people talk about corrupt organizations, they talk about FIFA, they talk about the IOC, and you hear a lot of skiers talk shit on FIS, and we've talked about FIS. You are the FIS coordinator or event coordinator or judging coordinator, something like that. So when people are talking shit on FIS, are they pretty much saying, fuck you, Jason?
I never take it as that, and I feel like I understand the sentiment when people are anti-FIS. But I genuinely, similarly to the Olympics, when I felt all comments made were more so out of misinformation. I think it's just the idea that FIS is somehow changing the sport and making it something that other people can't enjoy, when in reality, it's a contest structure. In order to have a contest structure where the best in the world is constantly up for grabs and they have this traveling contest circuit, there's going to be rules associated with it. There's going to be voids to be filled from within the sport, depending on how that is filled and how the sport evolves is subject to the way that the athletes are pushing it. Ultimately, my whole situation with wanting to get involved with FIS came from, well, I was judging already, and I kind of took the standpoint of, if I'm willing to complain about judging and the fact that I felt at the time it wasn't necessarily a true representation of the sport and the way that I saw it, at least, I would rather get involved than complain and not have something to say about it, So I inserted myself as a judge to be able to try to affect positive change in the judging world through my lens, if that makes sense. And then progressing there from FIS, it really just was getting more involved over time in the roles and capacity I was playing within the judging side of it. And then realizing that, ultimately, this is a job to organize the judging that needs to be done by someone regardless. For anyone that complains about the organization, it is the only one that's putting on, or has been for a long period of time, besides, I guess, the private events that are so few and far between, putting on a structured contest series and providing an ability for these skiers to prove themselves day in and day out.
So you can say fuck FIS, but without FIS, you're saying that you don't have a contest series, so we need FIS.
Yeah. For what it represents. And I do believe, with Jib League and so many other creative events that are popping up, there are alternatives for people that don't want to pursue that. But ultimately, this avenue of skiing will be competed in because it's evolved into what it is. And without FIS, we lose a lot of those contests. And I just think people misunderstand what it represents, and that there are people like, I mean, myself, that are trying to get involved and make it serve the needs that free skiing needs, if that makes sense. Not to just continue in the way that people might have perceived things to go if under that type of rulership.
Well, you're the guy who's trying to advocate for the sport and make a difference for us, because there's not many people like that. Is there anybody else inside FIS that's relatable to what you do in the organization?
I mean, on the free ski judging side specifically, no. Like, I'm the person that would be the representation for that group. But a lot of the people that we work with within FIS are like-minded individuals trying to make the best of something that has stereotypically carried connotations that may or may not be positive towards what they're trying to represent in the sport. It's a lot of dedicated skiers and snowboarders and people that just really want to make sure that these contests that are going to happen in the most effective, best, and most fair way possible.
All right, well, it doesn't sound as bad as everyone always makes it out to be, and that's hearing it from you who's working with these guys. But FIS is also responsible for rules, and I say but I mean, there needs to be rules in some different areas, especially for you judges, because the whole like no poles thing when you went back to the Olympics in China, it's like a whole different animal when you're judging people without poles. And did they put in a rule? Because I didn't really notice them as much this year. Was that kind of frowned upon, and did the judges let the athletes know they didn't want it? Or did FIS come in and say something, or how does that all work?
That was a couple years ago that it actually did get enforced, that there is like a pole mandate now within FIS sanctioned contests. And it kind of just came to a head all at once. There was one World Championships where people were just dropping poles left and right and starting to do something that kind of resembled like an aerials drop in.
Just gymnastics.
Yeah, like doing the hands overhead, getting ready to set, that kind of stuff. And ultimately, we brought it up, like realistically within the judging, all we're trying to do is be a reflection of what the athletes want within the sport. It was a question that we approached with the athletes. Hey, do you care? Like, is this sport the same without poles? Does it make it more or less difficult with or without poles from the standpoint of the people that are pushing the sport today, doing 21s, doing 23s? What do you think about how poles makes it work? And we had some of the top level competitors flat out say, I'm not going to use poles until you make me. It is so much easier to ski without poles. It's one less variable, blah, 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 So that kind of led to the, okay, well then it is adding in some way, shape, or form to the difficulty of all of this, thus something that should be considered negatively against them, and kind of had the athlete support and overall nation support for it before FIS said polls are mandatory. Technically, it was a gray area, and we had always kind of treated it as a stylistic approach. Your vision for the sport was best suited you riding without poles. But then it really did for a while clearly become a crutch that people were using to avoid the difficulty of figuring out how to grab with poles in their hand. So it kind of came to a head. It got dealt with. Ultimately, I don't love to add rules to something called free skiing, but ultimately, again, as the contest series exists, there will be rules because that's what competitions are based on.
Yep. And so I'm going to take it back to the Olympics now. And did they give you Olympic uniforms and pins and all that shit when you become a judge? Do you get the whole care package?
We get an outerwear kit from FIS, generally by whatever outerwear sponsor they've been working with that season. We did get stuff ourselves. Pin-wise, we did end up getting a couple FIS pins. I did take the liberty of making a judge's pin for our free ski judges that we brought to the Olympics. I had my experience in China during the COVID Olympics and didn't understand the pin trade game. Didn't really understand how big it was there. And the free ski judges, I mean, I was just the trick caller at that one, not even a judge, went over there without empty-handed, if you will. So we had nothing to trade. We came back with very few pins. So I made us a judge's pin that I distributed to the free ski judges for their pin trading escapades.
Nice. And then did you guys have access to the athlete village, or is that only for athletes?
That's only athletes, yeah. I mean, the town of Livigno is pretty small, and I think everybody was coming over to the part of town that we were staying in off of, which was right off of Main Street. We were next to some of the team houses as well, but the athlete village itself is just athletes, to my knowledge. I mean, it was kind of across the little valley, so I don't think I necessarily would have ventured over there, even if I could have.
And then How about the Olympics course? I mean, who designs it? Because the slopestyle course, it seemed like last time had so much more going on, and this time it was as basic as it got with like a small big air jump. Maybe not small, but it wasn't like some of the huge jumps you would see at X Games. And what were your thoughts about that as judges when you came up and you saw the course and you're like, man, these guys have worked really hard all 4 years for this, and this is what they get?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Olympic courses we've had in the past, they've been sometimes extravagant. This one, there were different renditions that had come up and what the course was going to be, but ultimately, without doing a test event, this Olympics had no test event. There had not been a slopestyle hosted where that slopestyle was, a half pipe built where that half pipe was, and obviously the big air structure was on its own. So I think ultimately their decision to play it simple probably was for the best. You would hate to see them try to do too much in that area after not being able to test it and really having an outcome that a course was unrideable. Ultimately, I was excited about it showing up with the slopestyle course because I thought this course is so straightforward. It is going to just be so transparent who can put the best rundown. When you see courses that have interesting transition features or rails that are set up in ways that don't allow people to be skiing in a very comparative nature, the judging just becomes so widespread and hard to make sure that it's aligned throughout the entire competition. So in some way, shape, or form, it is just fun to see, given the most basic course possible, who's the best skier, who is going to put the most difficult trick down because this rail isn't that complicated, you know? Ultimately, that course did prove to be challenging, mainly so because of speed and because some of those rail options were really like a 1 in 10 probability that you'd land because they're so long and technical. But it was a bit different, you know, like when I showed up in China, there was the Great Wall of China built in snow alongside the first 3 rail pads.
Yeah.
It was extravagant. Did that Great Wall add that much to the course? No, nobody used it, but it did look like a spectacle. But yeah, ultimately, it ended up being okay that the course was pretty straightforward. However, what if, you know, like the original course had a full-on 2-hit half-pipe in the middle of it? That would have separated the field dramatically.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start with longtime sponsor Elan Skis. And if you haven't skied on an award-winning ripstick yet, you're missing out on something that ski brands have long said wasn't an option. A lightweight ski that powers through anything and truly rips. It's game-changing. And Elan, while they've been around for 80 years, have been changing the game of modern skiing by doing things like adding side cut to straight skis with the Elan SCX, which changed the whole industry. They're building skis by skiers in a place with ski culture in the Slovenian Alps. And most importantly, they're supporting local shops. When the competition goes and starts selling direct, Elan sticks by their retailers who have been by them since the beginning. Elan is just built differently, and they innovate with a purpose, and that's to make your on-snow experience better, easier, and more fun. It's this approach that brought you the Ripstick and all of their award-winning skis. And when you're in the market for a new pair, visit an Elan retailer, demo a pair of their skis, and you'll know why Elan has built a cult following here in the States. To find out more about all the skis or to find an Elan dealer, head on over to elanskis.com. Next up, it's Insta360 Action Cameras, the only 360 camera that matters these days. These are the best action cameras on the market. They capture everything around you in 8K 360-degree video. It's next to impossible to miss the shot, and your footage won't be shaky thanks to the super smooth stabilization system, which is so important when you're on the mountain. Insta360 developed their X5 and X4 Air cameras with skiers and snowboarders in mind, which means they feature a freeze-proof design, batteries with longer run times, and a super durable design that will have you getting footage from the park to powder. And when it comes to editing that footage, Insta360's proprietary editing program makes it easier than ever to create Hollywood-level content or just a simple edit for you and your friends to enjoy. It's easy. Insta360 is the best action camera on the market, and for listening to the Powell Movement, they're going to give you a special offer. When you head on over to Insta360.com, they're holding a ski bundle sale for their flagship 360-degree action cameras, including the X5 and X4 Air cameras. When you're at checkout after you make your purchase, enter the code POWELL, that's capital P-O-W-E-L-L, and you're going to get a free ski pole mount from the good folks at Insta360 Cameras. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. When you think about judging over the years, I mean, I think in snowboard, the last time around, maybe in slopestyle, no, it was this year's slopestyle, that second place should have been first place. And I think the Owl kind of rejudged it from X Games and said, hey, we feel that way too. So I don't know if that validates anything. And we'll talk about the Owl in a little bit. But when you think about biggest misses of your career, have you had the one where you look back and you're like, shit, I really fucked that one up and I'm sorry?
We're human, that stuff does happen. And individual times, maybe yes or no. Like ultimately, I guess I had an opinion at the time that I think structurally, for the most part, always checks out. Tides change in skiing, where I can watch runs now from 5 years ago where this person was consistently maybe finishing in 7th to 10th place in a contest and be looking at their run through a different context in which, wow, how is this not getting first or second through these years? Because the tide kind of shifted in their favor and started to make their skiing look like the current trends would hit a bit more. Ultimately, we live and we die by those rankings that we come to pass at those contests. And sometimes they carry more thought and you think about them for a lot longer. But for the most part, I can't think of a time where I just totally blew it. And I'm sure athletes probably would say otherwise.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you didn't totally blow it ever, because that's very important as a judge. And I mentioned AI judging and the Owl, and you chuckled really hard. But that was like a real thing at the X Games this year. It was like a secondary type of judging. But what are your thoughts on the AI element of judging at contests like these?
It's interesting that they're trying to come in and provide data. And like I've been on a couple phone calls and had some emails with the people working with the Owl AI for X Games. And some of the stuff they're working on is awesome. Like realistically, if you can objectively track amplitude, body movements to a tune of being able to produce the trick recognition sheet, essentially, that we're creating as judges, from an objective standpoint, that's amazing. There is an element of judging that I think will always be too subjective to plug straight into AI to like actually replace the judges.
Like your style and creativity?
And just, I guess, like sport understanding really is something that, I mean, maybe that could be programmed in over a period of time, but the style specifically and approach to the course, as well as like, if you're looking at the tricks just based on their rotational value and how that implements difficulty, that only tells part of the story in terms of what we're looking at. And that's what AI would be great at looking at, is saying, this rider spun in this many directions, they carried amplitude of this amount, they stayed on the rails for this length of time, this was their direction of rotation on all of this. It can compute that and do a math equation and say what would win, but that's only half the story of a judged event. There are other elements that are kind of being taken into account, and most notably style, which is something you don't want to go by the wayside. And ultimately, like, I'm not going to turn down any tools that allow us to do our job more fairly and accurately, but I do think it is a far way away from me being comfortable with being paired up alongside an AI judge component that's spitting out a score, or ultimately weighing in on contests that were already judged saying that they disagree. I feel that the whole thing about the Owl AI was transparency. They want this to be a trackable, transparent result, which I understand at times judging doesn't feel like it is like that, but there is a mythology to it. But then ultimately, when they criticized the snowboard judging result, they didn't give any analytics as to why, really. It just says, we threw this into the Owl. The Owl agrees with the world. Zoe should have won. And it's like,
yeah.
All right, like, I'd love to see the data that you came up with that's relevant to the actual contest, because one of the metrics they threw out was length of time on rails.
I saw that too, yeah.
How relevant is that? You know, like, depending on which rails they hit, if they hit the exact same rails, absolutely that's a relevant metric. If they hit different rails, that could be a vastly different metric that we're looking at.
Well, and speed and how long you stay on, all of that kind of works into that time on rails as well. So
exactly.
Yeah, I could see a flaw there too as well, like you say. But I mean, and speaking of the tools, because you mentioned that having extra tools is you'd always take them. Do you have the tools that say the NFL replay guys have? where you have everything possible at your disposal to make sure that it is judged as well as possible? Or are they just doing the minimum, or not the minimum, or doing something just to appease everyone? Because I would think at the Olympic level, every possible piece of technology should be used in seeing who's best and worst. But you would know because you're in there.
Totally. And I mean, I think that's a big thing that's really interesting about the Olympics is how much attention to detail they did put into the specifics of making sure we get this contest correct. So much so that at the last Olympics, they were judging, again, I wasn't judging, off of the OBS feed, the Olympic Broadcasting Service feed. For anyone that watched that feed on TV this year, it wasn't much different from when it was 4 years ago in China. It was unpredictable. Sometimes you miss things. Sometimes the angle is a little bit too tight or too far out, or the feed is made more for television. And ultimately, their main goal is to produce a quality television product as determined by them. However, at this Olympics, it was made such a point of emphasis that we needed to have proper footage of everything that we had our own camera crew that FIS employed to have alongside these crews, where we had a standardized angle of every single element of the run to the way that we would want it, to make sure that we got this result that matters so much to so many people exactly right based on all the angles. Ultimately, we do have the OBS replay, so my kind of gut check at the end of that, watching every run, is just kind of watching what the OBS replay was showing to make sure that the OBS replay isn't suddenly showing something that we didn't see ourselves, as happened to the snowboarders in China with Max Perot's knee grab, where that was kind of an angle that was shown in replay once the scores had already gone out, where it became just clear as day that there was a major mistake in the score they had just put out. That you never want that to happen.
Yeah, totally. When you think about your highlight of this year's Olympic Games, what would that be?
Other than just spending some time with some good friends that were all really excited to be put in that position that was at so much consequence for the rate at which we're coming in there. Event-wise, men's big air was probably the best event maybe that I've ever seen in person. Just the crescendo at the end, the way that all the skiers were pushing the boundaries of what had previously known to have been possible. It was a fantastic show, really fun from a judging perspective when you get to judge the best of the best, and it's all these conversations that had previously just been theoretical and now they're happening in real time in front of you. And you get to be the one that's trying to critique the best, most complicated thing that's ever been done compared to another best, most complicated thing that's ever been done. But it's a fun problem to have. That was my highlight of the Olympics for sure, was the men's ski big air.
All right. And then what was the hardest or most challenging part of this Games for you?
I mean, from a judging perspective, I think there is a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves to make sure we get this right. So in addition to that, just overall looming sense of trying to make sure that we're super on point through this whole thing, the schedule is grueling. It is a long time. When you show up for a World Cup, when I show up for X Games or Snow League, you're right into business right away. You're watching practice one day, next day you're on competition. They've already qualified, they're into finals. You're in there for a couple-day window. The Olympics is really drawn out, and I just think to maintain the energy and attention to detail throughout the entire process is counterintuitive to how it lulls you in a way.
All right, so that's going to be my quick and dirty Olympic thing, and it wasn't really quick at all. I thought it was going to be, but we went 30 minutes on Olympics, so I'm going to go faster through this part of the podcast. And you grow up in South Lake Tahoe, and I think you grow up to a dad who was a dirtbag climber for a long time, maybe one of the OG Yosemite guys, I'm not sure. And, then he eventually has you, and I think you have a sister, mom, and dad. And when you have a dad who pursues individual sports, does he push you into a bunch of individual sports when you're a kid?
We just were exposed to everything. My dad's interests in climbing, skiing, ice climbing, free diving, all that kind of stuff definitely influenced a lot more what my sister and I were around. And growing up in Tahoe, skiing was something that I think my parents just really wanted to make sure that living in that place, it was something that we took advantage of our opportunity there. My dad, obviously, he had climbed and kind of tried to go the professional route. However, that was a tough task at the time, living in Yosemite. They moved up from the Bay Area to South Lake Tahoe, where my sister and I had the privilege of living for our entire lives. So we had a lot of nature in our backyards. We both played some team sports, but I definitely don't feel like we had much of the same push that I had some of my friends seeing with team sports to be into football or baseball. I feel like my dad specifically always really was all about the individual sports.
And it sounds like with skiing, it's like you didn't really take to it early on, but then when high school or late junior high, high school rolls around, all your friends are into it, you start getting into it, and you get hooked right away, and you're like pulled into skiing at 13, 14, 15 years old, and that becomes everything. Is that how it went?
Yeah, I mean, I had played some soccer and hockey around that time, and obviously had been skiing kind of my whole life, but not really taking it that seriously, and really kind of had grown tired of it because it was something that we were just kind of like, okay, it's the weekend, you're going up skiing, you're doing your ski team, which sounds so spoiled, and it is. But eventually I kind of was tired of it, and I really pushed away from skiing until, I guess it was probably late middle school, early high school that I had a couple of my closest friends really had gotten into it, and they were watching a lot of ski movies, had bought one of the Poor Boys movies back in the time and exposed me to that. And I was hooked. I was fortunate to have a ski background in that I didn't have to like learn how to ski myself. I could already link turns and ski all the black diamonds at my ski resort, but I had nothing going for me in the park. All my friends were just like taken to it like a fish in water, and I just saw something that I was so bad at, but I liked so much and just wanted to pursue it.
So you go all in on skiing, and while all the Palisades kids are heading up to Hood and Whistler for their summer camps, I feel like it's harder for you, and you had a different camp experience. What was your summer camp?
Being in Tahoe, South Lake specifically, I feel like was pretty secluded. We would get to go down to Mammoth in the spring, buy some day tickets and go ski down there. And Mammoth really was one of the meccas. And at the time, I really hadn't even understood what Hood represented entirely. But yeah, South Lake Tahoe had a camp for a period of time, which was South Shore Soldiers, which was just kind of a spring break camp that I found out that I could go to as a local kid because I already had a Heavenly Pass for like $200, which was much cheaper than the other camp alternatives that I knew that my family wasn't going to be able to front. So got to do South Shore Soldiers when I think I might have been a freshman in high school. So I was like 14, 15. That was a real eye-opening experience for anyone that was familiar with that camp. It really was party first, ski, snowboard second, and like very heavy on the snowboarding over skiing.
Yeah, it's a big snowboard crew, the South Shore Soldiers back then, right?
Such a tongue twister, yeah. Like Jimmy Halapoff, Jimmy Tomer, they were like local legends. They started this camp, and I had always seen flyers. I had seen the posters and stuff, and I just knew that this was a big park that I didn't have access to at Heavenly, a resort that I'm already riding. And yeah, this looked like the thing for me. So I didn't really even understand the amount of partying that was associated with that camp until I kind of saw it firsthand and was like getting picked up by my mom at 6:00 as people are just starting to get blitzed and ride a mechanical bull in the lobby of this Motel 6 in South Lake Tahoe. I did meet some really great people, and I was sponsored by Ninth Word briefly after this because at the time I was introduced to Shane Chandley, who was my coach. I went one year. The next year I was signed up. I blew my knee, so I came back the following year. Shane was there both times. Just great guy. Dustin Kimsey was another one of my coaches, but my most impactful coach there for sure was Rory Silva.
No way.
Shane didn't show up one day. I never really got verified where he was, but I'm like the youngest kid at camp waiting for my coach to show up. They realized that he was not going to show up because they got word of whatever was going on. Again, I'm 15. I don't really know. And they just rummage up Rory Silva out of his hotel room and say, hey, man, you got to ski with this kid today. Like, can you do it? And I had just seen Dubski 106. This is kind of a traumatizing part in my life, was watching his part. And now this guy's going to coach me for the day. And ultimately, like, Rory was the nicest, softest dude I ever could have imagined. Such a good guy. Like, absolutely should not have been scared of him at the clip that I was, and still consider him a friend. I'm very excited he coached me at South Shore Soldiers back then.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm going to start out with Outdoor Research. I could spend a lot of this ad telling you all the tech and why Outdoor Research is better, But know that in the 1980s and the early 90s, outdoor research built a reputation on functional quality outdoor gear that pushed the limits of innovative possibilities. And those who were function first were all about OR gear because it was and it still is built better, and outdoor research is still pushing those limits of innovation. This year, the outerwear focuses on 3 new collections: the Cloud Chaser for backcountry and the Powderverse and Hemisphere collections for freeride, as well as some staples in the line like the Snow Crew collection. These outerwear systems are styled for and by athletes like Mark Adma, Troy Podnelsak, Zoe Aitken, snowboarder Neil Provo, and others, and that's why this outerwear collection not only looks so good, but each piece is more functional than ever, and they're all you're going to need in any conditions. To find out more about the new collection, head on over to outdoorresearch.com. My final sponsor this round is Best Day Brewing, and now is the time to think snow. And skiers, snowboarders, weekend warriors, tubers, sledders, snowbikers, snowmobilers, snowshoers, sled doggers, shovel racers, snow angel makers, ice skaters, snowball fighters, igloo builders, you get it. The doers of winter are starting to get ready to shred, and post-shred, it's all about après. And this year, do après the right way. Forget about the calories, forget about the alcohol, forget about not taking more runs on the mountain, forget about getting in trouble on the way home, because with a beer from Best Day Brewing, you don't have to worry about any negative consequences, just incredible flavor. Blind taste tests prove that you won't be able to taste the difference between a Best Day and your favorite beer with alcohol. The only difference you'll notice is how good you'll feel in the morning, and you're going to remember what you did last night, which is almost refreshing as a Best Day itself. To celebrate your best day yet, next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Best Day. Or you can always buy it on your Alaska Airlines flight, Amazon.com, or head on over to bestdaybrewing.com to get the full assortment of Best Days. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. Eventually you get on Salomon, and Salomon had the most stacked team during the Jib, whatever they had, the Jib Academy.
Yeah, Jib Academy.
Yeah, so they had the Jib Academy thing going on. They were picking up the best riders all over the country, and they had the most stacked program, and you were part of that. That had to be an amazing thing when they picked you up.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely felt like I was in the mix for a little bit. Salomon at the time was just blowing up. They had the Jib Academies on the horizon. They were really the brand that I thought was like participating in the sport in the best way from my limited standpoint. They had all the riders that I wanted to emulate. It was such a cool brand. And to get to be sponsored by them through that era was really cool. And I was ninth ward through and through. I really thought that that brand was like my identity. And when I got on those skis, I was super excited. But then I had a neighbor and a local rep that really forced the issue and tried to help me out with Salomon. From then, I ended up getting linked up with Jenny Noftalin, who was the Salomon.
For sure, yes.
And Jenny was just fantastic. Like the stuff that she got me involved in, just because I got sponsored by Salomon just too late to be a part of the Jib Academy, because Jib Academy's age limit was, I think, 15 or something. And I literally, like, the Jib Academy in my area happened a week after I had already aged out of being able to compete in it. So Jenny, in addition to supplying me with this gear, got me involved as a coach for the Jib Academy when I was only 16, 17. I felt very privileged. I was traveling around getting to coach these Jib Academies, which is just skiing with these talented young skiers, with everything paid for, hanging out with Michael Clark, Andrew Hathaway, Nick Martini, Matt Walker, Tommy Ellingson, Seth Warner, Cody Ling. It's just like this stacked team of skiers that I look up to, and I get to travel around and be a part of this with them, you know, and that was really cool. But then ultimately, you know, Salomon is a big entity and really at the time seemed kind of focused on contest results towards the end of it, and seeming like I just felt like, man, I really don't know if this is something I want to try to keep up with because I don't know if I'm cut out for this contest game.
I mean, I would think that there was a while where you were able to compete with people. I mean, you did some do tours like the US Open, Aspen Open, all those things you did. I'm sure you did decent in them. You probably made finals here and there at different events. But at one point, the ski industry goes from the Switch 10 era to the double era. And that was the big separator, was like, if people didn't have doubles, they were done. And I don't know what your double game looked like, but
yeah, not good.
Was that the time that you stepped back from competing?
Exactly. Yeah. Like I feel like through my Salomon era was probably like the peak of my competitive stuff. And as I transitioned off of Salomon was when it all started to deteriorate. Although probably my most successful contest years still fell after the Salomon ones. Yeah, it was like I definitely witnessed the doubles starting to happen. I remember like seeing Bobby Brown competing for the first time, and Bobby and I had met at Hood the first summer I went up there, and like just knowing who he was, seeing this kid that is like so talented, but the double scene is just about to explode, and then he just kind of was on that wave from the beginning. He was so talented like in air and just had so much confidence in that way, and the sport just really took off. And I really felt like I was good at doing something I had practiced, that like I had mitigated the risk very well 100% of the time. I could spin in both directions. I wasn't trying to do doubles, and the doubles really did end up being a barrier for me to be able to continue to compete, and probably could have pushed it. I know there were skiers that never really got into the doubles in the way that other people chose to adopt to them. But I mean, again, like that's where the sport is now. Like there's no way that you could get anywhere near the sport now without being super confident with going upside down twice almost immediately.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy where the sport's gone. And at this point in your career, you've already made the switch to surface. And I think that's kind of like the end of the Blake Nyman era. I think Banks is on surface at that point. And you probably say to yourself, like, hey, I can still have a future in skiing. I'm just not going to be doing this contest route. And I feel like it's not a crossroads, but two kind of things parallel happen at this point. The first is in the beginning of your surface days. Is that when the whole Good Enough crew comes together and you start putting out web content?
Yeah, so I was on Salomon like pretty happily until I spent my first summer at Mount Hood. And at Mount Hood is where I met Mike Schneider, who was the founder of Surface. And I don't know what I did to leave an impression on him, but I really felt like he liked me and was like pushing to have me represent Surface, which at the time I thought it was really interesting. You know, like Salomon was something where I felt like it had kind of run its course. I didn't feel like I was pushing the limits of like what most of those legends that I was just talking about ended up doing in the sport. I didn't feel like I had the chops to really like try to go toe to toe in the contest realm with them. Okay, what's your joke? Who is it? Bugs and Beetles? Yeah. Sorry, brief intermission.
All good. So we were at Good Enough, and you guys were like the chill, fun, laid-back crew, not as weird as the traveling circus, and you got a 5-season run out of that. And with your ski career, with that whole time, was the goal just to ski and travel as much as you possibly could?
Yeah, exactly. Like I had kind of fallen out of the contest side. I really just wanted to keep skiing and filming and making videos with my friends, you know, and I think traveling circus really set the tone. I mean, seeing that was possible and that Will and Andy figured out a way to make a life out of traveling to different ski resorts and building funny things and skiing at different random places with different people. That seemed really exciting. Like all I wanted at the time was just to ski with my buddies, make some videos that we thought would further our pursuits as sponsored individuals within the sport, and just get to travel and check out new places and ski some parks that we wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise. So, I mean, realistically, it seemed like the logical step. And then I'm really fortunate that I had the buy-in from my friends that I did, realistically. Like Noah Curry, right off the bat, he and I were the ones that really wanted to try to produce videos because we felt that was necessary to our presence in the ski world at that time. Convinced our buddy Garrett Jurich, who had been filming some skateboarding and moved down to Sacramento, that what we were doing was more worthy of him moving back to Tahoe and then becoming our filmer. And then in addition to our other friends that were local and skiing with us, John Sussman, Alden Spence, Brett Donnelly, Raleigh White, like we ended up having 2 transplants in Khai Krepela and Pete Arneson, who really bought into the idea and were part of kind of the core crew as we were trying to make these videos, travel around. And it ended up being really just something I look back on very fondly, I'm lucky enough to have so many impactful years of my life just completely recorded on video where I'm just hanging with my best friends.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool thing to have. And when you think about your best friends, Pete, who's one of the guys that you had transplant, he's already a judge at this point. And from the research I did, it's pretty much you're always complaining about the judging, bitching about every contest. And Pete's pretty much like, if you're going to bitch about every contest, come to this judges clinic, get your foot in the door and do it yourself.
Yeah, pretty much. We had met Pete because he moved to Tahoe and we had some friends in common. But we ended up hanging out with Pete quite a bit through the Good Enough filming. And at the time, he'd already gotten involved in judging. And he got involved and kind of got greenlit to the top right away. Like, he was judging Dew Tour, he was judging X Games, he was judging all these big contests that we were watching. And we're sitting on our thumbs at home watching these contests that he's judging. And didn't even really think of it as a possibility or even something that I would necessarily be interested in. But we would complain to him about the judging. Like, how did you do this? Blah, blah, blah. And he always was on the same page as us. But ultimately, Pete was the person that made the intro to judging for me. He was able to help get me involved. He reached out to Steele Spence, who had been the person getting him on the contest in the early days. And when they brought a contest through Tahoe, which I forget if it was a Park and Pipe Open Series or a Rev Tour that it was the first one. I think it was a Rev Tour. I got to shadow judge. So that was my first entrance into judging, was Steele Spence allowed me to hang out during this event in which I learned the ropes. I learned to take notes. I saw what the protocol and procedure was from a judging perspective. And pretty much at that time, I felt pretty hooked. You know, that it seemed to me like I had found something that really catered to my interest and the pursuit that I've had in being as closely involved to this sport over the past decade at that point had been.
And you were fast-tracked, it seemed like, too, over the years. But in the beginning, when you're doing those events that are like 10 hours out in the cold, and you're doing it for the sake of the kids and getting experience, you're getting your $100 a day. And then you've got all these pissed off parents that are wondering why their kid didn't score higher. And they come to the judges, I would think, here and there. Do you ever have a parent almost like yelling at you and really, really angry because their kid didn't do good enough?
Thankfully, I feel like I haven't. Like, I've definitely, like, not to say that I haven't been complained to or about by people, but, like, predominantly, I'd say coaches and athletes. I feel like I've only had a couple interactions with parents ever, and all of them have been so overwhelmingly positive at the end of it. Like, my favorite one, I had this dad come up to me at USASA Nationals years ago and say, hey, I think you guys did a great job. I really think my daughter could have been third. She got fifth. Can you explain to me about this a little bit? Like, this was her run. This is the third place run. And really started to go into detail, proving to me that he understood our criteria. He knew where he was coming from, which as a parent, having a daughter in the sport, that's unbelievable to be that invested and involved that you understand enough about the sport to ask these questions. Luckily for me, I remembered immediately when he mentioned his daughter's bib number that she did a front flip on jump one and landed completely on her back. To which I just got to say, yeah, but she landed on her back on this front flip. And then he then turned to his daughter and asked, did you land on your back on a front flip? And she then answered, I didn't think they saw that. But ultimately, yeah, the parent encounters are few and far between. Like, at those events, you're definitely more subject to it. But I do feel I ended up not spending a lot of time judging events at that level. Like, Pete really got greenlit. I also got greenlit very quickly and was able to start judging contests that felt way out of my depth almost immediately when I started getting into judging. So really, USAC Nationals is probably the only one where I was ever in like constant contact with parents.
So is there ever a conflict of interest, especially in the beginning when you're like, hey, I competed against you last year and now I'm judging you this year?
I mean, the sport is so small to not have conflict of interest in some way, shape, or form. Ultimately, it was a bit awkward because, like, I really did feel close with some of these competitors that they didn't stop at the same time that I stopped. And then that role shift is pretty dramatic where we're going from just being buddies and skiing all the time to still, I'm your friend. I'm absolutely looking out for you, but I'm put in a position where I now have to critically evaluate your performance in comparison to someone else's. And I'm too caught up in this to do anything other than my best possible job. You know, people, I feel like at times might feel that being friends with competitors would give them a leg up, but I feel like it might even hold them to a different standard at times where it's really hard for that person to live up to the version that has been created of that person in someone close to you's head.
Do you see friends treat you differently once you get that job and you are kind of in control of, not in control, they're in control of their future, but you're in control of judging their future?
I really feel like I've been lucky that I haven't had too much of that. I'm sure it exists, and I'm sure that there are people that are hesitant to befriend me or speak with me on that level because they're not sure of how it looks from an outside perspective, not necessarily even how it would make me approach them differently, which I don't think it would. Ultimately, like, that's something I really do pride myself on within like the sport is just my connection with, I feel like the vast majority of the competitor base, that I feel I'm trying to make myself as approachable a person on this side of the sport as physically possible, to make it feel there's as little barrier to conversation as possible if something is going in a way that it shouldn't.
And I would think all of these people have respect for you, because not only have you been in the sport forever, but I've seen you call tricks before. We did an event together in 2020 where I was there on the mic calling the event, but you're calling the tricks, and I'm just listening to you calling the tricks, because what you do is almost like an auctioneer thing in the way that you're able to see the action and process it and say it so fast, because everything that happens when you guys are judging, it's so fast. And is there always a trick caller at events like you were at that hella big air?
Yeah, so at all World Cups, somebody acts as the trick caller, the person verbally saying aloud what's happening. That's mainly just kind of a courtesy to the group to make sure that everyone is seeing the same thing and writing down the same notes, and that everything is understood that's coming in. Because, again, the sport is happening at such an accelerated pace. The tricks that are being done are so complicated that if you were sitting there counting rotations, you'd be left way in the dust. So it really does help. Like most of the judges are able to do that, like immediately recognize and verbalize what trick happens. However, anytime I'm on a contest, whether I'm a head judge or not, I tend to be the person that is acting as the trick caller, because I find it hard to keep my mouth shut when watching it, I guess.
Who's a better trick caller than you? Is there anyone better?
There's people that I feel like are just as good as I am, but
that's a
specifically there at the last Olympics, I was the trick caller. That was my job. And at this Olympics, my close friend Adam Frisell got brought in to be the trick caller, which he's still in the same booth. His job is to transcribe the tricks that are happening onto the official document that gets sent out to the athletes. So he's part of the judging panel, but not actually acting as a judge. But he didn't have to do that much because I was saying everything and they would just type what I said in, and he was just fixing any clerical errors. So he had a very easy go of it at this Olympics.
Oh, that's amazing. And for you, what do you like better? Being the trick caller that really just has to call tricks, or being the head judge that's in charge of a lot more than just calling tricks, but calling tricks as well?
All parts of it are fun. To be honest, I feel like I'm fine with and embrace the responsibility of the position in a way that I wouldn't want to put it on someone else, if that kind of rings true. Like, I'm happy to be in the position that I get to make the hardest decision I've ever made watching a ski contest. I don't know that I would put that on anyone else. So I do enjoy that. Like, being a trick caller is really fun, just to be able to spout out and say objectively what happened with no ramification tied to your name to that result. That's great as well. Anonymity and not having to do it. I also haven't got to be a scoring judge in a really long time. And as a head judge, it's quite interesting going to the Olympics, being the figurehead of this talented crew of judges. But ultimately, I didn't punch in a score. I never had a number of my own put into the system to represent my placed value on that trick. I just was another part of the process. So it does feel a bit interesting that I was head judge of the Olympics, but still never had to punch in a score.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting when that's your job. But I've said we're going to do an hour. So what I am going to do now is I'm going to fast forward a little bit of your life. And one thing that I'm going to skip over really fast is 2015-ish, I think it is. You end up working at Windell. So you end up going to camp and being the director of marketing at camp for the school there. And that goes for, 5 years or so. And then 2 weeks before the pandemic, you end up quitting that because Surface has come back, and you've been with Surface for a few years. And you're going to be the marketing director and run everything at Surface. But you quit 2 weeks before the pandemic. Were you like, holy shit, when the pandemic happened and all your guaranteed money with your job that you had for 5 years is gone and you've got to build this brand Surface?
I feel like it all worked out a little bit easier. What you just said, that sounds very intense, which I don't feel like it ended up feeling like that too much, to be honest. Like, I'd worked at Windell since I was 18 off and on for the summers, and then worked as director of marketing from 2015 through 2020, then managing the camp and High Cascade for a period of time, which that job was really awesome. That was the job that allowed me to really continue to stay involved in judging, because the CEO and my boss, Kevin English, was so understanding of how much he felt it benefited the camp for me to continue to be out in that world working as a ski judge. in the middle of my time at Windell's was when I ended up getting in contact with Steve Weinstein, who is the current owner and my partner with Surface. And he had bought the company outright from Mike Schneider, who had stopped continuing with the operation a couple years before. So the brand had kind of ceased to exist. Then Steve wanted to bring it back and was looking for avenues to try to bring it back, and ended up speaking with me, for which I ended up taking on the task of trying to bring this brand back to life, a brand that I had been sponsored by, that I felt represented so much about what I thought was cool in skiing, that had impacted so many for such a period of time, that I had watched in real time as that brand had kind of plateaued and then faded into obscurity. And really, at the time, I had been on surfaces since I was 19 or 20, whenever I stopped riding Salomons. And then I was kind of just skiing whatever I had around, because surfaces didn't really seem like they were going to be skis I was able to keep riding. But Steve contacted me. At first, it just started with really handling the Instagram, trying to just bring the company back to life in some way, shape, or form and sell through a stock of skis that already existed. But ultimately, it got much more involved than that. And Steve had just given me the leeway pretty much to bring back the ski brand identity in whatever light I feel like it exists, which has been a super fun thing for me to be involved in. And ultimately, I'd say that started in about 2017. And then by 2020 was where it really hit an impasse for me, where with my judging, with my Windell's position, and with the surface thing that was now kind of increasing in responsibility, I ended up saying that I needed to step away from my Windell's role and focus on the surface job, which would then allow me to continue to judge, which I knew at that time that I had aspirations to do the Olympics, which probably wasn't going to happen in 2022, was going to happen in 2026. So I was like relatively well set when I left that job on the surface front. But then when COVID hit, to be honest, it was just a real big relief for me, because I feel like having the 3 jobs that I was juggling was really starting to wear on me. And I, at the time, was dating my wife, and I just feel like she could tell how much having the responsibility of those 3 different entities weighing on me, like something was going to give. And on a road trip, which just ended up happening to be right before COVID, said, you know what, I think I'm done at camp, and I think I'm going to focus on this surface thing. So ultimately, like when COVID rolled around, that was hectic for its own reason. I was in Sweden after judging X Games Norway, and then on a road trip going to judge Swedish nationals, followed by 2 other contests, at which point the world stopped and we just came home. But then ultimately, I just got to kind of know that I was situated with surface and that we were kind of already building something, and just kind of try to build it with a little bit more focus than I would have had I been on the road during that period of time.
Nice. So that kind of all worked out. And then with the pandemic, I'm sure while it was scary in the beginning, like everybody else, everybody sold product because everybody needed product. And while we could talk more about Surface, I'm not going to talk more about Surface, because at this point in the show, I get to something that I call inappropriate questions. And I want to make sure we have time to answer these. And this is the part where I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. And while I didn't talk about your Good Enough podcast, I just remembered it and I mentioned it here so everybody can check it out. But if you want to go inside skiing and you want to hear some nerdier stuff than we're going to talk about on this podcast, you can find that on the Good Enough podcast. But if you don't want to hear that and you just want to hear inappropriate questions, I was able to get a guy from the Good Enough crew, a guy that you were able to make move from Utah to Tahoe. I am talking about Khai Krepela. Did I say it right?
You said it. Yeah. Kyle Krepela. Khaki.
Hopefully I said it right there. But either way, I've said it wrong like 15 times and Khai doesn't seem to mind. So I'm going to go with...
We try to make a habit of saying it wrong anyway. So
yeah, I'm going to go inappropriate question number 1 from Khai. And here we go.
I talked with the Good Enough boys and we put together a couple of questions, and me as the representative. Starting out, would you rather full commit willingly recreating the infamous flat box Scorpion from Woodward Tahoe, or judge the Olympics again?
Oh, flat box Scorpion for sure. The Olympics was so much more of a drawn out process, and the flat box Scorpion just happened once and will be relived forever.
So the Olympics, was it not something that you want to do again? Is that kind of what that question alludes to?
I really do enjoy my experience judging the Olympics. We have had pretty hard set policy in the free ski community that it's one and done. Steele Spence only did one. He was so impactful to the judging side. I really feel like in order for the sport to continue to evolve, the judges have to be new and fresh with the contest. So I don't know if I'd put myself into that position again. I absolutely enjoyed it, but it was a massive mental thing to get through the last 4 years, understanding the end goal, which would be the most highly scrutinized contest of my life.
All right, fair enough. Let's go to your question number 2.
Okay, question 2. In a theoretical scenario of you and your friends driving from Tahoe to SIA, and your car breaks down in Utah around 2 a.m., it's going to be multiple choice. What do? A, pool your money together because there's 5 of you and obviously you can afford one hotel room for the night. B, stay at your good friend's mom's house, which is only 20 minutes away because that's a very solid choice. Or C, go spend the night in the Walmart and film Instagram videos the whole night.
For sure, the only answer there is C. None of the other ones make sense at all. Yeah, Khai referencing a notorious trip that we had to SIA with the big crew from Tahoe back in the day that went completely astray once we passed Kimball Junction. The car that we were in just stopped working, and in the middle of the night when we were heading all the way to Denver, we were probably at about 1 a.m. We were stuck and stranded, and called Khai's mom because that did seem like a logical option. She was pretty close, and ultimately the house was unavailable for us to stay in. So we went to Walmart in Park City and just hung out for hours, which got some good content out of it.
All right, there we go. Let's go to your final inappropriate question. Here we go.
Okay. In reference of an old Burger King commercial about a guy with tiny hands, have you filed a lawsuit for discrimination against tiny hand people, or are you just too loyal to BK Lounge? And how has it been all these years having to use 2 hands for most single-handed food items?
So, yeah, I've never heard of someone having to use 2 hands to masturbate, but that's what he was saying that you had to do.
I guess I have small hands. That's
the joke there.
I guess so, yeah. And, I think they're trying to introduce new jokes into the repertoire. Sometimes it's not that natural for them.
All right, we'll give him that one with the small hands. That's Inappropriate Questions, and that's the podcast. And I remember meeting you and your girlfriend, who's now your wife, and I was thinking, wow, these are 2 really awesome people. And that's before I knew about your ski nerdiness. And when you were calling tricks at that hella big air, I could tell that you had a passion for everything skiing, and it was so incredible to hear your knowledge. It was more impressive than incredible because it was like, wow, this guy knows more than anybody here. And then over the next 10 years, I've been able to watch you become the most important ski judge on the planet these days. And while it's a thankless job, skiing is very lucky to have you doing it. And you've done so much already that we really didn't have time to talk about all of it. But that's how it is. And thank you for telling the story, and thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
So that was time with Jason Arens, and the moral of Jason's story is that while so many people want to be pro skiers, it's not for everyone, only the best. But if you're not the best, even if you're really, really close, but you're not right there are plenty of other homes for you in skiing. And Jason found his in judging, and that has put him at every major competition in the world, and he doesn't have to perform, he just has to judge. So if you don't have what it takes to go all the way, and if you're doubting and you just think, oh, I'm not sure, you probably don't. Do what Jason did. Do what I did. Go and make a home for yourself in the ski industry. If you don't, you may end up selling stickers or some shit like that. And while that's not that bad, it's definitely not as fun as working in the ski biz. Speaking of stickers, I really need to start selling some before I get fired for the first time in my life. Well, I'm kidding. I mean, I routinely crush the goals that my boss set for me when I started this job, so I don't think I should get fired based on performance. But I'm not always selling stickers, and I need to start doing that more. So if you have an order for me, if you want stickers, banners, tents, whatever, email me at mike.powell@diecutstickers.com, and I will make sure you get the best pricing and my discount and all of that good stuff. If you don't need anything from me at Die Cut, well, thank you for listening. Thank you for reviewing me wherever you listen. And finally, please support my incredible sponsors who make this podcast happen. They are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Best Day Brewing, and Insta360 Action Cameras. Have a great week, everyone.